So let me give you the first question. What is the difference between strong and weak references, and when should we use strong references?
Do you want me to type the answer?
You can just say it out loud and I'll take notes.
Strong references increment the ARC, the automatic reference count. The automatic reference count is used to deallocate memory. If the count is 0, the memory deallocates. If not, it stays in memory. We use weak references to not increment the ARC, so that we're doing proper memory management.
Okay. Kind of a follow-up. Similarly, what is the difference between weak and unowned self-references, and when should you use each of them?
So both weak and unowned references don't increment the automatic reference count, but weak references have the option to be nil, whereas unowned is you use them when you know that it's not going to be nil. Yeah, that's the answer.
All right, so thanks for that. Now for the next one. You started implementing user analytics using a third-party SDK that sends that data to a server. What steps do you need to take in order to comply with Apple guidelines?
I've never done this before, so I don't really have an answer for this. But if I were to attempt to answer this in practice as I am now, I'd probably Google search and look at primary source Apple documentation in order to get my answer.
Okay. Now for the next one. When would you use a collection view instead of a table view, and vice versa?
Table view is really good for listing out like a list of elements. A collection view can hold like a collection of items, so I would use a collection view if there needs to be a very specific layout of different elements that needs to be displayed, and I use a table view if the information being displayed is pretty straightforward and pretty linear.
Yep. Any other cases when you'd use one instead of the other?
Like specific examples of use cases?
Or I guess more generally.
Just more generally. All I really have is my own personal experience. I've used a collection view when I was recreating the Netflix home feed, and we had to show the list of all the available media that you can consume, like TV shows or something. That's when I use a collection view. So if it's like a horizontal type scrolling, I use a collection view. With the table view, I'm looking at more vertical type scrolling.
Okay. Right, so thanks for that. Now for the next one. Given this protocol for a string queue, how can we make it generic so it supports any type of item? And you can make the code changes here.
Oh, okay. I know what generics do. I haven't implemented generics before. I know I would use caret, and perhaps I would define a generic label. But that's all that comes to mind.
Okay, no worries. Let me give you a follow-up question. How can you declare the maximum size of the protocol extension?
How can you declare the maximum size of a protocol extension? Protocols have sizes.
No, I mean line 6, the verb on line 6, maximum size.
Oh, okay, I see. How you maximum size? No, I just go q dot maximum size.
Oh, no, I mean in the code given, how would you declare it?
In the code, how would I declare it? Like how would I initialize it?
Now, how would you define maximum size of a protocol extension? So like on line 6, we define maximum size as a variable of this protocol. How would you define it as a protocol extension?
I would go extension q. That would be maximum size, which is an integer. So let's use the keyword extension, the name of the protocol, and within the curly braces, add whatever I need to add.
Okay, and what would you return?
What would I return?
Yeah.
If I was trying to initialize what's the question? It's like, what do you mean what I would return?
Yeah, so you have a definition for maximum size, you declare the type as anti get, where would you have the return?
The return statement for maximum size.
Yeah.
Right now it's just a variable, and there's a get. Oh no, I don't have an answer.
No worries. Thanks for going through all the questions for me. So let's imagine you're given an unsorted log file of accesses to web resources. We'll say that each log entry consists of an access time, which is represented as seconds, the ID of the user making the access, and the resource ID. So I want you to write a function that takes in these log entries as input, and I want you to return for each user a list of 2 numbers, the first number being the earliest time to use access logs, and the second number being the latest time to use access logs. So you can take some time and read through the problem some more. When you're ready, you can let me know what approach you want to use to solve the problem. If you want to describe your approach, then you can get started coding.
Sure. Okay, so let's just I'll make sure I understand the question first. Mm-hmm. So I'm given logs. I'm given, let's see, it's represented, access time is represented in seconds. So the first index 0 of this array right here is the time. the user and the resource, we would like to compute user session, specifically write a function that takes the logs, so here are the logs, and returns a data structure that associates to each user their earliest and latest access times. So, okay, the key, the data structure I'd probably use is a hash table that maps the user to an array, and the array is going to hold the access times.
Okay.
And the array is going to be sorted by earliest and latest. So make sure that the earliest times is first, later times later. And so we have example 1 here, which makes sense. We have example 2, right? Okay. And then we have example 3, user 10. Okay, so in the case that there's only one log with one user and just one access time, the start and end time is just the same number. Okay, so the way I'd go about solving this is I'd use a hash table and I'd check this, I'd iterate through the whole log. And if the user is already inside the hash table, then I would add that specific time, that access time, into the value, which is an array. I'd append it, and then let's see, and I would append it, and then that's all I would need to access. And then I would go through the hash table, iterate through the hash table, and access each array. And I just make sure that I sort each array by each array from earliest to latest, and then essentially I'll access the first and the last element and return a hash table that holds the user and their first and last times. What I would like to do is implement this and just get it to run, and with all these 3 separate examples.
Yeah, that sounds like a good approach. So you can get started when you're ready.
Sure. Okay. So here we go. Have the different logs. Function and sort logs is what I'll call it. And we are taking in all this log, which is an array of strings. We're returning a hash table, which will basically hold a string, correct? Yeah, a string. And as the value, it would hold the times. And in this case, the times look like integers as opposed to strings. So it's an array of integers represented. And so we have our input, which is the log. And the first thing I'd like to do is hash table holds the different users. So hash table. Now it's holding the user, which is a string. And the key is array of integers. And this is going to be first empty. And then I would like to iterate through the log. So for each log in logs, log in logs. So at this point, each log is the string array. And so inside the string array, we have the user. So our user is equal to log, just for readability's sake, of 1. And the variable, which is the time, which is an integer, is equal to the log at 0. And this is like an integer. That's a string. So we have each log in logs. We have the user and the time, and then we don't necessarily care about the resource. So we run the resource. And so if our hash table user, and what we'd like to do is unwrap hash tables at the user, and we would like to append else hash table for user array with time. That populates our hash table. And so we're going to do the logs, populating the hash table. And so now the hash table has the user. So the user has been reduced to just the unique user with all the specific access times.
Okay.
And so now at this point, it's necessary to sort each array and create a data structure to return an answer. So I'll create a separate hash table for now to hold our answer. String integer. And so for each log in our hash table, each user, and then times in our hash, our sorted times is equal to times dot sorted. Yeah, times dot sorted. So now the times are sorted. And we go for our times equal to sorted times first, our end time is equal to sorted times dot last. Okay, for times dot last. So we have our first, our last sorted times, and then our answer is going to hold our user. It's going to hold our start time, our last time. And you're going to return. This is my first draft, my first rough draft of an answer to the question.
Okay, so feel free to run and test when you're ready.
Okay, so let's see, we have the different logs. Everything's already in the global scope, so ideally, print result is equal to sort logs. And this correctly. I'm going to check for log 1. Logs 1. I don't need to do this like this. I'll change this. Sort logs 1. Sort logs. Logs 1. And print sort logs 2. And print sort logs 3. Let me see if I have any code. Our hash tables, our answer, and result. Let me just see if it compiles. So must be unwrapped. Int optional must be unwrapped to a value of type int. Okay, so does it believe my int log 0 is an optional type? Okay, so I'll do this instead. So this is line bar time 109. If let time is equal to log 0, and our time to cast it to time, enter time. Really? Cannot convert value of type unsafe pointer time. Hash table user dot append time, so 9.113. Expected argument of type int. Oh, that's right, because time is still a string. So if let time is equal to log 0, and then this logic inside the safe statement. So now there's hopefully time variable unwrapped time to the string. And so now, okay, what's the extraneous? Okay, one line at 137. What's the issue here? For logs and logs, what time is log? Oh, I just copy and paste, right? Remove this. If else log for loop. Optional must be unwrapped to a value of type integer. Because I think enter time is optional. Print time code. Okay, let me think. Var hash table string array enter logs user log 1 time let time unwrap time log 1. It should be fine, I think. Zero. Last. Let's do the sorted times at sorted times count minus. Cannot find last time in scope. Oh, this is because I named it incorrectly. Sorted times. unexpected type int because it's an int optional. Code. Okay, so now it's starting to print. But the main thing I want to check is I'm printing time. So I'm just printing all the times, returning the answer. Okay, that makes sense. So the times are printing. I'm not sure if it's a string though. It's probably just a string. And the main thing is I want the time to be in here. So I just typecast it inside time. String, string here. And then once that's done, let me make it works. Optional value must be unwrapped to a value of type int. So when I cast it, it turns into an optional. Okay, great. User 1, there it is. User 2. Okay, so now we do have the users and the array. That works. Code. Okay, so now I'm no longer printing the hash table.
The numbers are good. So what's the time complexity solution? And if you look on line 67, you see where we define n.
What's the time complexity?
Yep.
So let's see. It's going through the logs twice, so linearly, so 2n. And then the space is, so of n time, of n space.
Open time and space, you said?
That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay,
Let me explain.
So thanks for that. We can jump to the next question. And again, I'll start by giving you the inputs first. So let me copy that in and replace the input on line 72. And then let me give you the new problem description at the top. So this time, I want you to write a function that takes in the logs and returns the resource with the highest number of accesses in any 5-minute window, together with how many accesses it saw. So if you look on line 43, you see for the output of the function you're going to write, most requested resource, and you're given logs 1 as input. So you see this returns resource 3 and 3. So what that means is, out of all the resource access in logs 1, you say resource 3 was accessed the most number of times in any 5-minute window. I was accessed 3 times. You can see the exact times when it was accessed. So you can take some time and read through the problem some more again. When you're ready, you can let me know your approach, and then it can get started coded.
Okay, write a function that takes the logs and returns the resource with the highest number of accesses in any 5-minute window, together with how many accesses it saw. Most requested resource log should return resource 3 is accessed at, okay, it's 3 times and it's accessed at those specific times. Okay, that makes sense. So basically, we already have the user. So the function, can I use my old code? So in sort logs, I already created the hash table matching each user and an array of every time they access. Okay. And so all I do is just get the count of that array. And then that would basically be the number of times it was accessed. And so it would just be return that count and then return that array. The question though is, of accesses in any 5-minute window, do I need to, how do I say this? Account for that somehow as a parameter in my function, the timing?
I'm not sure I follow. The input to your function is the logs. The logs tell you the time each resource is accessed.
Yes. So, within every 5-minute window, you said?
Within any 5-minute window.
Within any 5-minute window. So write a function that takes the logs and returns the resource with the number of accesses in any 5-minute window. And then the time is actually in, how do I say this? Seconds currently, right?
Yeah. So
60 seconds times 5. 5 times 6 is 30. Let me write this down. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 60. 30 at the 0, every 300 seconds. So write a function that takes the logs and returns the resource with the highest number of accesses in any 5-minute window. So when I hear window, I think of sliding window. Because it's a 5-minute window, I'm thinking of a 300-second window. Mm-hmm. And so right now, what we currently have is all these logs. And in the earlier code I wrote, there was the each user to all the different access times. And then so we'll sort the times. So then we go through the sorted times array with a 300-second window. Okay. And then within that window, if it's within that window, we can add the frequency count. If it's on the right, we add the frequency count. And on the left, we remove the frequency count, and we just keep track of the highest count as we go through the array. And then that would return the highest frequency count within a asking write function that takes the logs and returns the resource with the highest number. Oh, it's asking about resources, not user. Yeah. So it'd be a hash table of resources and then access times, and then returns the resource with the highest number of accesses in any 5-minute window. So it'd be resource, key, value, array of sorted access times, and then a sliding window to keep track to figure out what the frequency, the highest frequency for that specific number of accesses to get that. And then you want to return the, So we'll do the sliding window at each array to get the number of access times. And then on the larger loop, we'll keep track of the resource and then the number of times it was accessed. And then eventually we just return that specific resource key with the count, the highest count with the array. Yeah, can I code it?
Yep, that's not a good approach. So can you get started when you're ready?
Okay, great. So let's see. function most requested resource, function most requested resource, and we're taking in logs string, and then we are returning. It wants to return. How do I want to represent this? Resource. Resource. Can I just create a struct to represent the answer? Answer, and it has our resource name, which is a string. It has resource count, integer, and then it has the access times, right? So our access times. And so I'm going to return answer struct. We'll call this result. And then do the same logic, going through each log, so for each log and logs, and then variable our hash table. This hash table is mapping a string to also an array of integers and the logs. We need the resource, so our resource is a string, and that is log2. Then var time is log0, correct? Okay. And then hash table at a specific resource. And hash table at that specific resource. Append integer of the time we want. So we cast it turns into an optional, so we need to unwrap it. Else source. It's our hash table from resource to the array of access times. And then it's not sorted though. So I'd like to modify the hash table directly.
The documentation if you need to.
I'm free to check documentation if I need to.
Yeah.
Okay. I think what I will do is this is just creating the hash table. So the hash table is created. I'm gonna have to iterate through anyway. So I'll just basically, it'll be fine if I access by copy and then sort the copy and then work through my solution that way. So what I'm gonna do then now is I need to iterate through the hash table. So for each source and then times in our hash table, we need to do is times then is our, so let sorted times is equal to times dot sorted. So we have our sorted times. And then now that we have our sorted times, I need to get the highest frequency count. So what I'm going to do is create a separate function for sliding window calculation. What should I call it? Highest access number. Count. And I'm definitely passing it an array of so times the integer. And it's going to return to me an integer of the specific count. And so at this point, we have our sorted times. So we go our variable left is equal to 0, and then our right is equal to seconds, correct? So it was 300 seconds is equal to 300. And then so we go while, now we iterate through okay, so our window, we have our left, our right. And let me think about this. So we have our access times, and currently it's sorted, which means that looking at our previous output in the console, we have, say, okay, so 53760, 53760, 522, 522, 300, 300. Okay, so I'm gonna take 1 minute to just think how I want to write this code.
Okay.
Okay, so what I can do is instead of creating starting at 0 and then 300 and creating a window that way, what I can do is I can just take the current start time and check to see if the okay, wait, we're not really restarting the window. So var window length is equal to 0, var max length is equal to 0. For each time in sorted times, if the current time let me think about this. So we're going through the array, and it's guaranteed to have window length 1, max length 1. And so for each sorted time then, for each I in row, comma, sorted times count, going through it, and then our variable is, so I have a current time starting at 1, and if
Also, as a heads up, we have about 10 minutes to go, but you get credit for as much progress as you make if you don't finish.
Okay. Yeah. So window length, max length, starting at 1, and then if okay, I need to check my. It's valid if it's within current. So okay, I'm gonna make comments to help me think. It's valid if the current time minus current time. Valid if the sorted time at I, which is the current time, right? If that specific time minus 300 seconds, sorted time at I minus 1 plus 300, let me put it on that side instead. If this is less than or equal to, it's valid. If that current sorted time, you look at the previous one, not necessarily the previous one. This is definitely throwing me for a loop right now. Right now I have the restarting window template, but I want is actually the fixed window template. So far left, I'm just go with my far right to 300 and go. I'll right is less than or equal to our sorted times count minus 1, which is like the value of the last. I'm going to keep incrementing our right pointer. And what we're going to say is if sorted times at our interval is between, if our interval is between sorted times right and sorted times minus left. So if and then I need to be able to check the current time. So if the okay, I have the sorted array. I want to window 300 seconds. The array has just the access times. My intention is to move the left pointer and right pointer at the same time. And I also want to check to see, I basically want to put each of those specific access times on a timeline so I could actually slide my fixed window and keep count. But right now it's only represented as a number. But right now my while loop is going from my right pointer. So essentially one of the ways I can represent this then is, okay, the first thing I need to represent is but rather than going through it as array, I could just go through it as, okay, I have it for R in your 300, between 300 and then the sorted times last time, right? That's right. Sorted times, right? That's the right pointer. So that's the right pointer. And so yes, exactly. And then now I need to, so all this does is just incrementing through 0 to the last, which is the total number of seconds. I still need a way to check the times. And so what I can do is I can just take var sorted set, and I can convert the sorted times array into sorted set. So that way I can check the time, sorted times. But now that it's a set, I can check, now that I'm going through each specific individual time, if how do I say it? Sorted set contains, if it contains R, which is that right part of the window, if it contains R, so now I can keep track of the count. So var count, which is an integer, is 0. And what we can do then is increment the count. So count plus equal 1. The count. If the sorted set contains, so R, sorted set contains, the left is the right pointer minus 300, then we reduce our count by 1. Yes, then we reduce our count. And then so at this point, we keep track in a greedy fashion our count, and then we can return count. Right, there we go. It's a bit closer. And then so assuming that we have our count, then sorted times resource sorted times. So at this point, we want to keep track of our greatest resource, I guess I'll call it. Greatest resource right now is just interesting. And then our greatest count is equal to 0 or -1 right now. And for sorted times, we want to check, we want to update our greatest count. So our greatest count, so before we do that, our variable, which is our current count, is us calling the function get highest access count. And where I'll be passing in sorted times. And I'll be returning the count for that specific resource and set of times. And then our greatest count is going to be the max between our current greatest count. Oh, well, let me do this in if statement because I'm updating 2 different variables. If our current count is greater than our greatest count, and our greatest count is then updated with our current count, and then what's also updated is our greatest resource is then updated to the current resource that we're looking at. What this means then is that once we iterate through the hash table of our resource and times, so I basically want to have, okay, so let me just, I have like 3 minutes left.
So we have about 30 seconds left, actually.
About 30 seconds left. But yeah, I basically, at this point, I'd create a struct, right? I'd basically create a struct to hold the greatest resource, the greatest count, and then access our hash table.